Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Keys to Business Process Management, presented by Director of Business Solutions here at Watermark Learning, Dr. Susan Hydorn. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting in moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the session. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Dr. Hydorn.
Thank you so much, Mariella. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Today, we are going to talk about business process management. And so we'll give you a few tips and kind of an understanding of what business process management is and is not, because sometimes people get a little confused at that. We're going to talk about 5 components that create that business process management life cycle and list kind of the benefits. Why would we even want to do that? Because it does take time, like everyone else. And oftentimes we feel like, oh, we don't have enough time. So hopefully we'll give you some tools and tips before you leave here on business process management. So we have kind of a pop quiz here for everyone. Kind of curious. So we have a person driving a car. We have a person maybe writing a book. We have golf, and we have a manufacturing line. What do they have in common? So that is the pop quiz. Put your answers in the chat. What do you think they have in common? Here's some questions. They need training. They might. They require focused attention. They all involve people. Let's see, what else are they saying here? Focus, people. Yeah, focus processes. Let's see, I'm just trying to, they're coming in fast and furious. I love it, process. They're all processes, Michelle. And some of you others, you've had that too. They are all processes. Yes, indeed. They're processes to create something of value, attention to detail. Yeah, so you are absolutely right, is that they are processes. They're all processes. So it doesn't matter what we're doing, whether we're driving a car, whether we're writing a book, we have processes to do that. And so that's what we're going to talk about when we're talking about business process management. How do we manage processes? And not just around process improvement, but managing them for their life cycle, continually monitoring and continually tracking them, continually managing them. Because if they don't, and you've probably seen this across your world, they kind of get out of whack and quite easily too. So it's amazing. Just to give you a little bit of background, I have been a consultant for longer than I care to say, for over 35 years. And there's not been one organization that can't improve their processes, or processes have gotten old and stale, or they don't meet value. And so that is really commonplace. And how do we manage those processes so that we continually track it? And if it's getting off if it's diving off the edge of the cliff, we can bring it back saying, hey, this isn't efficient. It's wasting time. It's wasting money. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So as soon as my little computer works there. So what is a process? Let's just do some table setting on what it is. So a process, number one, has to provide value to its customers. If it doesn't provide value, you have to ask yourself, why are we doing it? And not just because we've always done it that way. And value changes. Value changes in the eyes of the beholder, right? What we valued 5 years ago, we don't value today. So it is a constantly moving target. Value is in the eyes of the beholder of the customer. And if the customer's sense of value changes, we have to look at our process and say, hey, what do we need to do to change to make sure that we're meeting the value they want today and not the value they want yesterday? So it's a sequence of activities. Okay, we got step, 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 step. A lot of you probably have done some process modeling. What are the steps we need to take to create value in this? And it transforms and consumes inputs into outputs. And this is important. So processes, because a lot of times when we're dealing with process, and I've seen this, we'll analyze current state, look at future state, but we only look at people who are doing the process. And if the process needs to be more efficient, well, how do we make it more efficient with the people we have? But what we don't often look at, and you're probably all smarter than most, but I've seen this happen, is that we don't look at the inputs to the process and we don't look at the outputs to the process. So if we're looking at process value, and maybe we're creating a product and there's some problems with the product, well, maybe it started with the inputs, or maybe the customers aren't getting what they really need. So processes transform or consume inputs to get outputs. That's what the process does. It takes something raw, takes that input, either transforms it, changes it, or consumes it into an output that provides, again, value to the customers. And so when we're looking at processes, we have to look at it not just from the start and stop of where we see it, but the inputs, the intake of the inputs and the outputs. It has a start and a stop. It starts somewhere and it stops somewhere. They're repeatable and ongoing. So you said, Susan, I just said you said a start and stop. The process has a start and stop, but overall, it's repeatable, ongoing, unlike a project. A project by nature is unique. We've not done it before. And once it's done, and we don't repeat it. We may repeat the process of project management, but we don't repeat that particular project. So processes are ongoing. Every time I go golfing, I will use that process. Every time I'm going to create courseware, which I do a lot of, I'm going to start with that process. And those processes are repeatable. It might be a different class that I'm teaching with different content, but it is repeatable. The process is repeatable. So processes are repeatable and ongoing, that it's done the same many ways, or with many people, I should say. And then it's accountable. Somebody's got to be accountable for doing it. Who's doing it? Who's providing the inputs? Who gets the outputs? Who's doing the work in between of creating that process? But at the end, processes create value. If they are not creating value to a customer, and whether that's an internal or external customer, why are we doing it? You have to ask yourself. It has to provide value, and not just because we've been doing it for the last 30 years. Because I always, when I came in, they go, well, it's just the way we do it around here. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You probably heard all of those. So yeah, we have to go back, and when we're tracking and monitoring, say, hey, is it still providing value? Or if it's not, why are we doing it? We're wasting a lot of time and resources. And especially when we are getting so lean and having to be adaptable, it's no longer okay just to have processes like, yeah, it's not bothering anybody, just do it. No, you're wasting resources of time, money that could be going elsewhere. So think of a company that has great processes. And how does that add value to the company? So I want you once again to throw in the chat. What are some companies that you have seen? It's like, wow, I bet they have great processes. Amazon. Yes. Costco. Tesla. Toyota, yes. Walmart, the federal government, Chick-fil-A, Boeing, the automotive industry. Yeah, they've had processes for a long time, certainly. I was just talking about Amazon and how their processes have changed. You know, Amazon started as a little bookseller. and and now look at it. You can order anything. NASA, the military, yeah, Xerox, electric and gas utilities. Yeah, consistency is expected, quality. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And I know you have so many other mounts, but Amazon is the top of my list too. Great processes. Think about, when you used to order something, it was always 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, it didn't matter where you ordered from, whether it was, pennies or some, Northern Tool or some, whatever it was. It was always 2 to 3 weeks, and then Amazon came around. And look at their processes, how they have just defined it. I mean, it's on your doorstep in 2 days, and it's not just books they sell anymore. They sell anything and everything. And so what have they been really selling is their processes, their efficiencies, the ability to order something and get it in 2 days or one day, sometimes same day. That is if they didn't have great processes, there's no way that they would have been able to do that. Google, they keep changing their engine, they keep making it more efficient and faster, and with all the AI stuff. Toyota, a lot of you said Toyota as well as Amazon. Getting it. I mean, they were in that Deming total quality management time, just making really efficient processes and making sure that there's no waste. We're getting what we need to get done. We're using it. And then Walt Disney. A lot of times people see Walt Disney is having great processes. Think about how many people go through Disney, no matter which park you go to, efficiently. Yes, you do have to wait in some lines, but think about the efficiencies of that. The efficiencies of feeding that many people in a short amount of time, the efficiencies of keeping people moving and going from ride to ride. And I mean, there's so much stuff in the background that you don't see. And it's when you go there, it seems like it's effortless. It's effortless because of the great processes that they have. So think about if your company, and maybe maybe some of you even work for Amazon or Toyota or something, but think about, and they can still improve too. I mean, we're always improving. So I'm not going to say that, they can't stand on their laurels either. But think about if you just took a couple things and how much you could improve that process and how much money you can save. All processes can be improved, all processes, but if we have to track it and we have to pay attention to it. So I'm just going to look at a few more here. Yeah. Consistency, healthcare. Yeah. So the better the companies, the better the processes they have. Or I would say the better the processes, the better the company. Let's put it the other way around. So there's lots, and there's certainly more than this, but I just picked out 4 that are usually well known for their processes. Walmart is another one. They got where they got because of their processes. You may like them or not like them, but you have to admit they still have great processes. So what is process management? Okay. It's actually a process whereby we manage and govern the process. So it's a systematic, disciplined approach. And so it looks at identifying the processes first, designing them, executing on them, documenting them, measuring them, monitoring them, having controls in place to say, whoop, this process is getting out of sync. Wow, our shipping is taking too long. So what kind of thinking about those measures, how are you tracking your processes? Are you monitoring them? Or like many companies, and I'm sure your companies are much better, some of the companies I've seen, they don't worry about the process until it goes really broken, and somebody's complaining about it, or, we have to update the software. Well, maybe we should look to see what the process is. Oh, well, we'll just use the process that was built into the software. And that gets to be a mess too, because if you don't understand what your processes are and you use the process that's integrated in the software, that might be an advantage because there's a process and you haven't maybe updated yours for a while, but you have to then teach a lot of people to do things differently. So processes, considering we have to be so adaptable, I mean, you think the change is coming at us. And so once upon a time, we could have probably put in a process and just left it alone to, take care of itself over the years. And it's like, yeah, not a problem, but now with things changing, people identifying different points of value, we have to be adaptable. Our processes have to be adaptable because yesterday's processes, are not going to help you for today or for tomorrow. And how do we need to be able to manage them? So what process management is not, and I just want to define, not it's not project management. We do have measures, we do have to track them, but processes are ongoing and they do involve project management because if you're improving them, you're going to have a project to improve them. But once the project's done, they don't constantly monitor the process. It's not a task, because task gets done, it gets done. It's a continually ongoing thing. And it's certainly not just a model. A lot of times BPMN is the business process management notation, modeling notation, actually. And so it's not just modeling the process. Okay, that's a process. No, it is a livable, breathing, eating thing that takes resources and takes time to be able to do. So one of the pluses of BPM, business process management, is to able to be align those processes to ensure that the alignment of those processes that you're doing meets the organizational strategy. So not only does it bring value to the customers, but every process we do, we should consider, does it align to the strategy? What if the organization, because organizations usually have strategic initiatives, they do some strategic planning, and maybe the view has changed. Oh, we don't do that any longer. You hear companies about that. Oh yeah, we spun that off. We don't do that process any longer. Or we outsource that. We don't do that any longer. Well, then it's not needed. And then why are we doing it? And so this really ensures, if you're managing your processes, that you take a look and see where the organization is going. Are they going to New York? Or are they going to California? Very different sides of the country. So if our processes are still taking us to New York and we really wanted to go to California, they're not going to be in sync. And in fact, they're going to be fighting that strategy. And so we want to make sure that BPM is part of that organizational initiative, part of it aligns to the strategy, that all our processes are helping move that organization to its strategy. And there's a couple ways you can do this. And so this kind of shows you those two ways. So we have a project-centric view and we have a process-centric view. So you can see kind of the dotted line kind of separates them. First and foremost, you have a business vision. The vision, the strategies, So it's like, where do we see ourselves in the future? So vision is all about where do we want to go? And so then you have outcomes of that is a strategy. So if you look at a project-centric view, which you can do, what projects are going to help us fulfill that business strategy? And so some of those projects are going to be process projects. How do we improve our processes? How do we, maybe it's software, but then in software, you should always improve your processes first before you deliver software. So you're still going to identify measurable goals and objectives. What does this good process, this future state process look like? We'll put a project together and manage that. But what I would say even more effectively, because we're pretty much companies pretty much do the project-centric view. If we do the process-centric view, though, you still have your strategy, but you're not asking what projects are going to help fill the strategy, because that's usually what we do. We do our strategic planning, we have our strategic initiatives. Okay, what projects are going to help us get there? And that's an okay question to ask. However, we change that question and say, okay, we got our vision, we got our strategic initiatives. What processes will support that business strategy, those business initiatives? How are our processes going to? And sometimes the processes might be a barrier. We hope all our processes are enablers of that strategy. So we still see measurable goals and objectives, but we're focused on the process, and then we'll use projects to update that process. So it's it's a slight difference, but it's an important difference. Are we looking at processes? Because that's what stays. Projects come and go. Here's how we kind of move forward. BPM also operates different and manages sideways. So it goes across silos, because a lot of our organizations, and I haven't met too many that aren't, we're pretty siloed. We have sales, we have marketing, we have manufacturing, we have purchasing, we have HR, everybody's in their little silos, and hopefully the people on the top are talking to one another. What BPM does is makes that workflow more effective and efficient. Why? Because it goes across silos. So when we do a process, we're talking about cross-functional processes, not just what sales does, or here's marketing, and then we throw it over, we throw it over the wall, our part of the process, and then somebody else does the other part. Without thinking about it. What if we thought about it and say, okay, from start to finish, cross-functional. What is the process? Where are some of the barriers? And some barriers could be each in a silo, could be in a particular silo. Think about an Amazon process. That process of purchasing goes from the time I purchase it online, okay, here's what I bought, to when it's on my doorstep. How many silos does that cross? Think about it. You've got the certainly the ordering process, and then you probably have some inventory and warehouse processes, and you have certainly the transportation processes, the shipping, the packing, all of that. Certainly marketing. I mean, it goes across all those silos, and yet it's still efficient. Why? Because it's not looking at the process with just a silo. It's looking across functions and say, how do we make the most efficient process across those silos? How do we make it easy for people to work with us? How do we get it easy for people to have that product on their doorstep? How do we make it easy for people to buy more stuff? Because you're always getting, well, we have a suggestion for you to purchase. So really looking at it from a more holistic process than, oh, here's what HR does and we need to improve their processes. Think about how more effective if you start at the start of the process to the end of the process where it delivers value to the customer and cross-function. So when you're looking at them, you're looking at it from a holistic view. So there's different ways you can kind of attack this, so to speak. So the first one is, and this is, I think, what a lot of us do. We do a business process improvement effort. It's like, yeah, this is kind of an old stodgy process. People are kind of complaining about it. It's slow, or customers are complaining they don't get the product fast enough, or there's some problems with the product, and we've gotten a lot of returns lately, or whatever it is. So it's a singular initiative. Oh yeah, we got to find that problem. So we'll look at a particular process. It's very project driven. We have a project to improve this process because we have a problem to solve, or maybe it's a new process we want to take an opportunity to do, but it's just a singular event. We put a project together, We improve the process. See you later. You can also do it from an enterprise process management that applies BPM principles across, functional, just like I was talking about, cross-functional. So you're going to apply business process management principles, methods across functional processes. So more of that Amazon view, right? So enterprise, so it's looking at the processes. So you still might have a process improvement effort, but you're going to look at the entire process and not just one component of it. Or you're going to do continuous improvement, providing staining feedback. So figuring out how are we going to track, how are we going to measure, how do we know when that process has gone loopy, crazy, or it's not performing to our standards. Because process, it's interesting, you put in a process, you train people, everybody knows how to do the process, and yet over time, not only does the value of the customer change, but the people doing the process get a little inventive too, and kind of change the process oftentimes. And so something that was maybe streamlined, gosh, you know what? If we only do this, I think it's going to be easier, and not thinking about the people, downside from you that gets the process outputs. But, pretty soon you have little things like, I can do it in Excel faster. I'm going to go to Excel and do this, and then I'll just add it into, what I was doing. I mean, I've seen that a lot. I mean, so pretty soon, yeah, it's really nice streamlined process gets out of whack. Besides our customers changing, we do that to ourselves, thinking it's more efficient. It might be faster for me, but maybe the person on the line isn't going to see that faster. Somebody filling in for me doesn't know what I did. So it's, the output is now different. So having a sustained continuous improvement effort certainly helps so that we can monitor the process. And then it's like, okay, Houston, we got a problem, so we can see it right away and address it before it gets really out of kilter. And then we have to spend all that time and money thinking, whoops, we gotta do something different. So getting to our 5 components in BPM. So if you're looking at, we're gonna go quickly through each one. So BPM, business process management, includes process modeling. We got to model the processes. We'll model the current state. We'll model the future state. We have to analyze those processes, what's wrong with it. We have to do new process design, which is where we would put the new future state. We have a process transformation. How do we transform that process and put it in? And then just being able to manage performance. So we're going to look at each one of these a little bit bigger detail here. So we have to model the current state process first. And Deming, who was really big in TQM, total quality management efforts, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And it's like, I love that quote because, it really kind of comes down to the brass tacks. So we often want to take our current state processes and we might do a process map, step by step, and then decision points, and then, further steps. Or we could do it in a swim lane. And if I'm doing process improvement, I love the swim lanes because anytime you have handoffs take time. The more handoffs you have, the longer it's going to be sequenced. So how do we, because it's a great place to start looking for waste and things that you didn't need, is like, where are the problems? Do we have too many handoffs? Do we have too many cooks in the kitchen and it's taking a lot longer than it needs to be? So swim lanes are great for that because they show the handoffs. They also show especially when you're doing cross-functional, these could be functions, or these could be departments, or they can be areas, but you can kind of divide it into groups. And so if my goal was to, let's say, streamline this process as I look at the swim lane, I could be able to look at each, not only area, department, function that does, each step, but I also can take that, in this case, create mortgage, and divide it into sub-processes and just look there and say, okay, where do I need to tweak? What do I need to change? Where might be the problems? What might be causing more time? And if I want to dig down each one, like take application has double lines, which means it has a process map exploded around that. So it's a good way to start and just look at it and say, where could our issues be? And again, though, here's the thing that processes don't always show, doesn't always include the inputs and the outputs. And so you still have to look at those because that might be the key to the issue that you're dealing with. So we have to start somewhere, model the current state, figure out what we have to date. Got to start there. Then you want to analyze that current state, analyze the process. Now, according to some of you might have done Lean Six Sigma, kind of common quote is that 95%, I don't know where they got this from, but they're always telling 95% of processes add no value. Customer doesn't want to pay for them. They could care less. 5% adds value the customer is willing to pay for. So think about that. Think about how much we could improve the processes in our organization just by doing some process improvement and getting rid of that non-value added stuff. Now, there are some things that are non-value added that you have to do. Okay. So things like payroll. If you don't pay your employees, chances are they'll find somewhere else to go and you won't have any. Does the customer want to pay for, doing payroll? Not really, because they don't get any value out of that, except for the fact that you're still in business. So you have those non-value added, but they're kind of things you still have to do. So there's going to be some of that it's a regulation. You just got to do it. The customer doesn't want to pay for it. It doesn't add value, but you got to do it because otherwise you're going to be fined or shut down or whatever. So let's talk about the value and non-added value because I think that's kind of a fun conversation. I happen to be a really big football fan, and I can't wait because August is coming. So I happen to be in Minnesota, so I'm a big Vikings fan. Always excited for every season and always disappointed at the end, and that's just part of being a Viking fan. We always do so well, but then we forget how to play football when playoffs come. So who knows? But think about a football game. Hopefully you and you can apply this to any game though, but I'm picking on football. You could do basketball just the same. But the elapsed time, if I want to watch a football game, most football games are 3 hours long, 3.5. So it's a good thing to do other things at the same time. But it's 3 hours in duration, elapsed time, noon to 3 o'clock, Central Time. So that's the elapsed time. Regulation time, though, is only 60 minutes. You only got 4 quarters of 15 minutes. How do you take 3 hours to play 60 minutes of game? Well, because there's timeouts and there's breaks and and they got to put those ads in. And plus the players probably need to catch their breath. Value added time, though. Think about it as in a football game. What is the time where the ball is up, moving? Somebody's doing something, And so the value added time where the ball is actually in play is usually 140 plays, 10 seconds. So the total value added that you're actually moving the ball is 23 minutes. So for 3 hours, you get 12% that adds value, basically moving the ball. So you can see how that's, we just get used to it at school. Of course, a football game is that long, and so sometimes you go in and out while they're playing. But this can be with a lot of things that if we look at the elapsed time and look at the value added time, wow, huge difference. And if we had to make the football game go faster, it'd be harder on the players, but go faster, what could we do? Well, and we actually do this as an exercise in one of the classes in business process improvement, because there's always improvements to be had, and you get some really interesting conversations. But even just simple things like a football game. How can we streamline that? So as you analyze the processes, you got to think about it. If you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answers. So a question can be really critical as you're looking at, how do we analyze? How do we get a better process? How do we get rid of waste? How do we streamline the process, make it more effective? How do we direct it to make sure that it meets the value? So some of the first, and I would say this is almost the first question that you want to ask is, would our customers pay for this? Would they want us to know that we're spending time on this? Now, again, I said some things you got to do, like payroll. But sometimes we do processes that, do we really need to do this? Would they be happy to know that we spent time doing this? What gives you the most problems? A lot of times I say, hey, what keeps you up at night? What's going on? What's, some of the issues that you're incurring? If you had a magic wand, what do you change? When I go in as a consultant, it's interesting because the people that work on the processes know this most of the time. But nobody listens to them. So I have all these process improvement ideas and go, oh, wow, look at that. It's like, your people were telling me this. Listen. So, if I always say, if you had a magic wand, what would you change? And you can ask your customers that. You can do focus groups. If the process breaks down, where does it break down? What do you think is the biggest barrier or the biggest pain or you wish could be different? You just get them to kind of think creatively. Well, is this the right process for today's environment, or was this yesterday's process? And it isn't doing much today, but you're following it because that's what you're supposed to do. So getting creative and critical. So I think when you do process analysis, it takes creativity to ask the questions and see things different ways and help them see things different ways. It also takes critical thinking. So kind of both spectrums, and I would say more systems thinking too. How does processes go into other processes that go into other processes? How does it all fit together? If we change one, what are we going to do to the others? Kind of have to look at that space also. All right, so once we analyze it, we figure out what the problems are, how we're going to streamline it, and then we got to design our future state. So, and Henry Ford says, if you've always do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. So in essence, you keep going the same old way, you're just going to get the same old thing. I think that's also the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing, expecting different results. And we hope we're not, too crazy. So there are 3 design principles, time, quality, and value, that as you design the future state to think about. So time is, cycle time, turnaround time, delivery times, how long does it take from start to end? Quality, making sure that we, quality is job 1. Quality is at the source. Create mistake proofing processes to reduce mistakes so that you will be notified that if, whoops, made a mistake. And that can be anywhere from, when you go to Microsoft, it says, do you want to save this document? And sometimes I'm dumb enough to say no, and thank God for history. So I can resurrect the old one because I didn't save the new one. Just little things like that. How can you make it easier? How can you make it mistake proof? You look at your sockets that you plug your computer into, and oftentimes we have a wider plug-in and or little narrow thing, and you plug in, and you can't plug it in both ways. You only can plug it in one way, so it's preventing us from making mistakes. You go down out of the wrong exit door and it starts blurring at you. I mean, there's all kinds of things that will tell you where to go and what to do. I travel a lot, so you're in airports, and think about all the signs in the airport that tell you where to go and what to do. So you don't get into trouble and you don't make mistakes. You're in the right lane. Value, making sure that the product, meets or exceeds value expectations from the customer. What are they expecting? So kind of considering considering those components. So think about the impact, the BPM impact. So if we take that current state, make changes, make it a better future state, make sure it aligns to where the organization is going, thinking about if we're already paying, you can ponder the fact that if we're already paying 95% of all that stuff that's non-value added, and we make small improvements, what's going to, even just 5-6%, think of what's going to happen to either your stock prices, the cash flow, employee engagement, employee retention, because people really get tired of poor processes. They go, dude, this is just stupid. I'm just tired of this. Your credit rating, customers satisfied, more customers, always helpful. Yeah, so I was just looking at the chat really quickly. The amount of time we spend on process, because that's how we've always done it. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. And Deborah, thank you. Still waiting for the Vikes to win the Super Bowl. Yeah, me too. I'm going to be waiting for probably a while, but we'll see. Then we have process transformation. So this is not only do we have to go from current state to future state, so we have to implement that, right? So current state, future, but you know what? Processes are done by people a lot. So you certainly can have automated processes, but there's going to be people somewhere. And since you just changed their life with this process, you have to also consider them. And this is one of the things that as you do process improvement, and that I've seen is we forget the people side. You know, people get used to the process that they're doing. You know, it's like, okay, this is a process. I come to work. I know what I'm doing. I'm comfortable with it. You know, I can do it in my sleep. And now you changed it. So it's like, so, you know, there might be, you know, some shock or anger. I mean, how many times can I tell? He's like, oh, the stupid, you know, executives, they don't know what they're doing. They should come down here and see what they are making us do now. You know, this is just ridiculous. Well, the executives see it from one perspective, the employees seeing it from another. And I would always suggest getting buy-in before you make a change, but sometimes that does not happen. It says we're going to change anyway. But you got to get their buy-in somehow. You know, involve them where you can, because otherwise they're going to go through this and they're going to get stuck here. You know, there's going to be resistance. And then I've seen actually organizations which have brought me in to get people out of resistance. This one organization, I was the third consultant they brought in to make this change. And they just said, you know what, you're the third consultant we have in, we're going to wait you out. And then I just started laughing and I said, good try. We're not doing that. So let's talk. And we did get it through. We get it through, but you have to bring the people in. Otherwise, you're going to make the most perfect process, and it's not going to go anywhere. They're going to wait you out. They're going to do it differently. My way was better, and then you got a messy process again. So. And then we have to be able to manage process performance, track it. So figure out, first of all, what are we going to measure and how are we going to measure it? If the measures don't exist, we'll have to figure out, you know, how can we make them exist? And I'm not talking about measuring it to death, because I know some people really get excited about statistics and measuring things. Ooh, I get to measure. You know, you don't need 10 measurements. Figure out what you need to measure. And now here's the other thing is, you know, pick the 2 or 3 that will tell you if it's getting out of whack. You know, oh, it's all of a sudden taking longer, or oh, boy, we have a lot of errors. Man, how did that? Oh, the customer complaints are going up. Figure out what you want to track and then track it. You know, whether you want to figure it out the timing. Do you want to do it weekly, monthly, by product? I mean, it can be all kinds of things, but you want to make it easy, but you also want to make it sure so that you can look at it and just see, oh, yep, this is out of whack. We got to do something before you get really big problems. Oh yeah, 25% of our customers are complaining. Well, let's do something before that. because so we can kind of monitor that. Now, the other thing to know when you're monitoring performance, what you want to measure might be changing. If the customer values something different, speed to market, or maybe they want quality more than speed to market. You got to make sure your performance measures match what is really needed and what is valued, because that'll change. If you're just going, yeah, gosh, we got the best quality, in the place, but if there's lots of problems, or not lots of problems, but customer complaints on, yeah, you have a good product, but it takes me 2 months to get it, measure doesn't mean anything. So make sure you're measuring what you need to be measuring. Benefits of doing BPMN: compliance and security regulations. If we're doing it consistent, we can manage it. We know if there's any security issues, we know if there, are we following regulations? That's certainly a big one these days. Certainly easier and faster to transfer knowledge. You've got everything documented. You know what the process is. People can be trained on the process really quickly. Somebody's leaving, they can train somebody else. You got consistent things going on. Risk management. What are the risks? Let's manage those so that they don't get out of hand and they manage us and become a huge big issue that we have to now address. Separating the non-value added from the value added. Let's do more value added and do less non-value added, because something that added value 5 years ago may not be adding value now. And it's like, why are we doing this? Regulation could have changed. Something the customer doesn't want anymore because they don't value that. Then why are we still doing it? Not just because. That's why we've always done it that way. Certainly doing continuous improvement. So managing your processes will put you on that road. You're going to be monitoring them. It's like, okay, so you don't have to wait. Wow, we haven't touched that process for 10 years. Well, maybe it should have been looked at earlier than that. So it just being in the mode of continuous improvement certainly provides accountability, making sure those processes are every point, every touch point in that process, people are accountable. Accountability for managing the process and making sure it doesn't get out of sync. So each cross-functional process should have a process owner that manages that to make sure that it's still working well. Agility, like I said, we're changing constantly. Customers are changing, their sense of value is changing. What they wanted yesterday isn't what they want today. How do you keep up with that? Crazy. Certainly more efficiency. We're always asked to do more with less. We've been in this cycle for at least 10 years, and after COVID, got worse, I think. So, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to hire any more people, figure it out. Well, if you can get more efficient processes, it'll make your life a little bit easier. So, certainly decreasing cost, increasing profits as well. We all know that things, are fluctuating, that economic conditions are crazy right now. We're not sure what, to expect. So where we can, how do we minimize the cost of creating that service, creating that product, and how do we increase that net profit? And then visibility. We have visibility in the process. The process doesn't run us, we run the process. And with the technology changing, at one time, maybe it made sense to have people do it. Now we can automate it a lot faster, easier, maybe with less errors, So if we have visibility in the process, we can always, and have a head on for process improvement, come into that and look for things that need to be tweaked, need to be changed, need to be automated, need to be stopped because we don't need it anymore. So personally, why should I care? That should be an executive thing. Well, it's if you think about enhanced morale and satisfaction, I've been in areas where, oh gosh, I don't know how people put up with it. It's horrible, horrible processes. It's like, yeah, I know, sometimes I'll just go, fine, I'll just put up with it. But, gosh, if people have an opportunity to make something easier on themselves. You don't think we want to do that? Yeah, productivity, efficiencies, certainly in communication, increased transparency. Everybody understands the process. I've been in situations where, because people want to save their jobs, so I'm not telling anybody what my process is. I'm not telling anybody what to do. They're in they made a little silo by themselves, and that's not helpful. It's being transparent. Everybody knows the process. Everybody knows the flow, how it's working, and then if we have happier customers, that certainly makes our jobs a little bit easier too. So with that said, we have some upcoming classes. Sorry, this is really weird coming out, but we actually have a whole program. We have the Business Process Management Foundation that kind of gives you some of the stuff that we covered. On the 23rd, we have a business process modeling class where you learn all kinds of models, and each model tells you a different story. On September 24th and 25th, and September 29th and 30th, we have a business process improvement. So it goes into that time and quality, piece of it, and saying, how do we really analyze the processes? What tools might we use to analyze the process? How do we really design a really good process? So with that said, I'm going to bring up the chat again. And if you have any questions, we have a few minutes to look at some of the chats. I'd like to think of process improvement with the context of leaving things better than you found them. I love that. Yes. Awesome. Funny Amazon related story. A few years ago, I was on an OPM dedicated team where Amazon had hunted our manager and they left for Amazon. Yeah, wow. Does this? Yes, it does. Ways of working. Yes, I would put it under ways of working. Unless, Mariella, did you have it under something else for PDUs?
No, you absolutely got it right. Yeah, it'll be under ways of working, and you can register that under any webinars that you watch this month. I also saw that we had a question really quickly that I wanted to bring up. It was a little
Yeah.
earlier in the
As
chat.
you look for that one, I'm gonna
Yeah.
just a couple other things. Change management is very difficult unless you have management buy-in. Yes. Yeah. So this is where you use your leadership and influencing skills. If you can prove, because management always wants to save money or make money, if you can prove value, make the business case for it, that's what I do. It's more likely that they're going to go to change. People do not like change, or at least most of them. Most people don't mind change one if they're bought into it, or if it's part of their deal. You're right. But if they're not brought in and they're just told to change, I don't even like change. And I introduce change all the time, and I kind of like changes. And it's like, okay, I can make this better and easier, faster. And I've been doing that since my first job, but that excites me, but it's my ideas. It's the trouble is getting other people to get buy-in. That's why you talk to them and say, hey, what would make sense there? It does involve resistance, always. Even the most of us that like change, we are going to have some resistance. I even tell my bosses, it's like, okay, wait, stop the presses. You got to tell me why. There's always going to be some resistance, even, trying to figure out what in the heck are we doing? Who decided this? Sometimes just getting context around it certainly helps.
100%. And that question was, how do you best combine input, output with process modeling? Great question.
Yeah, you can certainly extend your models to include those inputs or outputs. SIPOC models are good. So it talks about suppliers' inputs, the process, the outputs, the customers. So you can see big picture what the inputs are, who do they come from, and who gets the outputs, and what are the outputs first, and who gets them. And that comes from kind of your Lean Six Sigma. It's an acronym that says SIPOC, but it's really supplier, input, process, output, customer. And that gives you a bigger picture and thinking, okay, especially when you're doing your analysis, is there something on the input side that's getting screwed up? Or maybe we don't have good inputs, whether it's quality data, whether it's a quality product. in order to take that input and transform it and consume it into an output. And you already started with a bad mixture, and by the time you get to the output, it just gets worse.
Excellent. We had another question come in. Does Scrum have anything directly related to BPM?
Boy, that is a good question. You certainly can use kind of the Scrum, or I will say agile mindsets, agile principles as you are working on process improvement, because agile actually has lean input. Lean is focused on getting rid of waste and making things more efficient. So it has a lean tendency anyway. Don't do anything is Scrum. Don't do anything you don't need to do. Do it if you need to do it, but don't do it if you don't need to do it. So the principles of Scrum actually have been taken from lean, which is part of your process improvement. I don't know if they have a direct relationship, but that's kind of where some of the principles of Agile came from.
I love going back to the principles. Awesome, awesome question. All righty. Well, I think the only other question that we had was on the slides, and you will be getting you will be sharing a copy of this recording with all of you in an email after the webinar. So be on the lookout for that if you missed out on any part of the session. All righty. I
Oh,
believe.
Mariella, just one more thing. Somebody
Oh yeah.
asked, how do you redeem credits?
Oh,
Can you explain
great
how to do
question.
the PDUs?
Absolutely. Yeah, I will go ahead and drop in a link here on how to claim the PDUs. Common question, and I have it here just as a quick resource that we usually have for our peeps. So yeah, let me pull that really quickly. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for attending today. There was a lot of fantastic engagement. So thank you all for throwing any feedback, any questions, any input into the chat. It's awesome to see, and I really appreciate an active audience. Love to see it.
Yes.
Here's that link in the chat. Alrighty. And again, if you want to learn any more info on BPM, we went ahead and dropped a link in the chat to that as well. So again, be on the lookout for a copy of that recording and let us know if you have any questions. But as always, thank you so much, Dr. Hydorn, for your fantastic
Oh,
info
you're most
today.
welcome.
So awesome that a lot of our peeps are saying thanks and very helpful. So thank you all for joining us today. But again, have a fantastic rest of your week. Hopefully, we'll see you all very
Yeah.
soon in the classroom. And bye for now.
Yes. Take care, everyone.
Bye.